Welcome to the Maintaining Access Lab. Now in this lab we're going to do two things. We're going to learn how to create user accounts and add them into different groups such as the administrator group, and then we're also going to learn how to manipulate the firewall so that we can open up access that we'll be able to get back in at a later time. So to begin this lab, we're going to start with a connection on our Windows XP machine again. We've exploited the same vulnerability, we're back there going through the Natapi service again, and we're now at the interpreter prompt. So one of the things I want to do is I want to look at what process I am and what user I am. So again, we're going to do our get PID 980, and now if I type in PS, we can see that 980 is associated with the system user inside the service host process. So what is that if we do the PID and the get SID? The SID is -18 because it's a system level. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go onto the Windows box and we're going to start creating some accounts in this lab. And so what I want to do is I want to have an administrator's account. The system can create users, but it has a hard time with some of the groups because it's not used to doing that. It's not really what it's made for. Usually you need to be an admin level user. We already know that John Sim is an admin level user. He has those rights. So what we're going to do is migrate into his process and become John Sim. So we can use process 480, which is the Explorer process, and we'll go ahead and migrate there. So we'll migrate into 480, and then we'll verify our SID again by doing get SID. And you can see we are now John Sim, the 1003 level user. So that's a good place for us to start. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to shell, which is going to drop us into a Windows command prompt because everything we're going to do from here on out is standard Windows commands. So what we're going to do from here is we want to actually see what user accounts are on the system. So the first thing I'm going to do is do net user. And when you do that, you'll see the accounts that are created. You'll see here we have the administrator account, the guest account, the help assistant account, John Sim, and 2 support accounts. And what this second support account is one that I have created just to show you an example of how to do that. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to create another one. And so the real support account was actually this one, the 338945. I created one 338945, and you notice there's just 1 digit difference. So we'll do the same type of thing because it's easy to hide from your system administrator by having these additional accounts. If I put something in there that said hacked or ethical hacker or anything that just looks out of the ordinary, it'd be very easy. Now in this particular PC there's very few users, so it'd be very obvious. If you're in a domain environment though, there's hundreds and thousands of users. So you can blend in very easily as long as you use the same naming scheme. So in our case what we're going to do is to create a new account, we're going to type in net user and then the username we want. We'll go ahead and use support, just straight up support. And then we'll give it a password. I'm going to use A1B2C3 just to keep things easy as we play. And then /add. When I do that, that account has now been created. We could type in net user and hit enter, and you'll see that account now exists, the support account. Now, what rights does that support account have? Well, that's a great question. Let's go ahead and look at it. The way that we're going to do that is by typing net user and then the username. So net user and then the username, which in our case was support. And you'll see that the support account was created and its password was last set just now. The password is good for 60 days. It does require a password change every 60 days, but it is changeable right now, so we could change our password if we wanted to. Now it can log on to all workstations and it has all login hours. But the only membership it has is a standard user account at this point. So as a standard user account is not going to be very useful for us, we're going to want to get that into the administrator group. So the first thing we want to do is we want to learn what type of groups are on this machine. And so what we're going to do there is we're going to type net local group. So when we type in net local group, you'll see the groups that are on this computer. There's the administrator group, the backup operators group, the guest group, the help services group, the network configuration, power users, remote desktop users, replicator, and users. The only group we're a member of though is the users. We want to be a member of the admin group. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're just going to do net local group, and we're going to see who's in the administrator group first. So we're just going to type in administrators. And you can see right now the only 2 administrators in the system are the administrator and John Sim. Well, we want to be an administrator too, so we can just do net local group, the name of the group, which in our case is administrators, and then we're going to type the username we want to add, which is support, and then /add. And now it tells us that it was successfully added. Now, how do we verify that? Well, we can look in the group membership or we can look at our user. We're going to go ahead and do both just to verify. So net local group, administrators, and you can now see that support has been added to that administrator group. The second thing we're going to do is net user and then support, and we'll see that they now have the ability of being an administrator as well as a user. They're in both groups. Now, this is just a very simple example, but it shows you the power of what you have. Once you've gotten an administrator account, you can start spreading out and creating your own accounts and your own ways back into the system. And that's the way we wanted to show you, is just a simple way of creating additional accounts from the command line. Once you're at this command line, you can do anything that the Windows system will allow you to do from the command prompt. So it's really important to have that Windows System Administrator background, because then you know how to actually operate this system. Now the second part of this lab, we're going to play with manipulating the firewall. So the firewall can actually be manipulated from the command prompt as well. And the way we do that is by using the netsh command. So if we do netsh, this will drop us into the netsh shell. So now that we're at the shell, we want to go into the firewall settings. So we'll type in firewall. So now you'll see our prompt says netsh firewall. So if I type in question, you'll be able to see all of the commands that are available for us. So in the context of our firewall, we can add a firewall configuration, we can delete a firewall configuration, we can dump and display the entire configuration script, we can get help, which is what we did by the question mark, and then we can reset it or set it or show the firewall configuration. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at the current firewall. So what we're going to do is do show and hit enter. Now from show, we want to see what the service configuration is. So what services are allowed to run. Right now they have enabled file and print sharing. So that's good. That's one of the things we use as a way to get back in. Now what about our port configurations? Let's do show port opening. And so here we can see what open ports we have. We have 139, 445, 137, and 138. What are all those ports used for? That's right, all those ports are used for in the firewall to allow file and print sharing. Since we have file and print sharing enabled, those ports are also available for us to use. In our case, we use 445 as the port that we exploited. That's the one that we came in on. Now, let's see what the logging on our firewall is. So if we do show logging, you'll be able to see that right now drop packets are disabled, we don't log those. Connections are disabled, they don't log those. And where is the location of the log file? It's in the Windows directory. Why is that important to us? Well, in our last step we want to cover our tracks, and so if we've made changes to the firewall, all those are going to get logged. We'll want to go in and clean those out in the log file later on. So what are some examples of things that we can do here? Well, one of the things that the system administrator might have disabled is ICMP or ping traffic echoing. And that way we couldn't footprint the network. Well, one of the ways that we can do now that we're inside the network is we can turn that back on if we wanted to. Or if it was on and that was a vulnerability we used to figure out where the network was, we can turn it off. So let's go ahead and turn it on. I'll show you how to do that just so you can get used to using this tool. One of the ways you do that is you type in set ICMP setting 8, which is the echo reply, and then you're going to type in enable. And by doing that, we've now set that setting so that other people should be able to ping it. Now, if we wanted to disable that, we would just do set ICMP setting 8 disable. And again, this goes back to what we talked about before. When you break into the machine, if you want to make sure nobody else can break in because you want to keep that machine to yourself, you might go and actually secure the machine even better than it was before, such as disabling features like this. Now, file and print sharing is already enabled, so we don't have to worry about that, but we could actually disable it at this point. So once we set our back door and we have another way in, we can actually patch the vulnerability that we first exploited, and then we can disable file and print sharing so that other people can't get in as well. We're not going to do that right now because we haven't set our back door yet, so we want to make sure that's still open and available for us. But to do that, what you would do is do set service file and print, and then you do disable. And then you would hit enter, and that would disable the service. We don't want to do that right now because we're going to need it to be able to break back into this box later on. Now, one of the other things you can do is you can just disable the firewall completely. And to do that, you just do set op mode disable. And right now, the entire firewall for that machine is off. And we can verify that by going over to that Windows machine and looking at it. So once we're on that machine, we can just go over here, look at the computer might be at risk, and you'll see now the firewall is off. Now if we enable that, we go back, you'll see the firewall is now on. And that's the type of thing that you can do with this firewall, is you can turn things on and off as needed because you now have control. Normally though, what we're going to do is we're just going to allow specific programs or ports through the firewall. Let's say, for example, I wanted to have a netcat listener sitting on port 5000 on the machine. Well, the way that we would do that is we would have to set an exception in there. So what we can do is set allowed program, whatever the path of the program is, in our case it'd be netcat, and then allow, NC is the name of what we're going to allow, and then enable. Now, we have not set up netcat, we have not uploaded that tool yet, so there's no benefit in us setting this, and it's probably going to error out if we do it. But I just wanted to show you what the command is. Again, we'll play with that more when we start doing our backdoors in a future lesson. Now, what if we just wanted to open up certain ports on the firewall? Well, let's go ahead and look at that again. So again, if we wanted to add something, we would do that with the add command. Now, what are we going to add? In our case, we want to add question mark. I'm going to show you the different things you can add. So here you can see you can add a port or you can add a program. I just showed you the program with the netcat example. Now, for a port opening, let's see what the configuration setup is for that. Well, what you have to do is do add port opening, TCP, UDP, or all, the port you want, and then you're going to give it a name, whether it's web port, if it's IKE, if it's DNS, it could be hacker, whatever you want, enable, and then all or custom. So in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to do a add port opening, TCP 80, we'll call it www, and then we'll enable it for all. So what we'll do is add port opening, TCP port 80, we'll call it www as if they were running a web server, and then we're going to enable all. Now it says it's good. How do we verify it's good? Well, we can do that from the command prompt, or again we can look on the machine and see what it's going to look like to the victim. What we're going to do here is we're going to look at it from the command prompt. So what we're going to do is we're going to do show, and then we want to show the port openings. And if you remember correctly, we had 4 ports before that were all associated with file and print services. Now we should see port 80 added to that list. And so you see that port 80 is open. Now we can verify that on the victim side. What will that look like to them? Well, for them to see that, they're going to actually go into their firewall, and they're going to actually have to look at the configuration and the setup for it. Now, where do you get to the firewall on a Windows XP machine? You just scroll down and click on Windows Firewall. Then from here we go to exceptions, and you'll see there's now this exception for www. And if we edit it, we can see TCP port 80. That's what they actually did. And so you can see that from the victim perspective, they're not going to see anything unless they really are checking their firewall all the time and looking at it. In this case, they're not, and so they don't see it. So those are just some basics of how to use the firewall and set it up. The nice thing about it is that you can do everything from the command line, but you've got to get used to the way the command prompt works. You have to get used to the way the NetSH firewall tool works. There's lots of things you can do once you have the exploitation of the machine. It's just a matter of determining what your intent is and what it is you want to accomplish.